Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
API-led connectivity really consists out of two key components, right? APIs for exposing system functionality, as well as integration flows for connecting systems and synchronizing and transforming data. So let's dig a bit further into what these APIs look like in specific. When we discuss the franchise and platform models, as well as the production and consumption models of APIs, the central idea was that core capabilities are packaged up for consumption. And in the new operating model, when we look at modern APIs, you package up core IT assets and their capabilities into a modern API. Over the years, and you likely know that, the term API, which is an application programming interface, has been used generically to describe connectivity interfaces to an application. However, over the past few years, the modern API has really taken some characteristics that completely changed the game. A modern API adheres to standards, and it's nowadays typically HTTP and REST. The past it was open SOAP, and the REST services they are developer friendly, they are easily accessible, and they're understood broadly. They are treated a lot more like products, I would say, than code. Often they are designed for consumption for specific audiences, like for mobile developers, for example, or for ETL purposes. They are hopefully well documented, and usually they are versioned. Like we do with Salesforce, we're now on API version 45, right? So we are versioning our API since years with that. With that, users and US developers, they have certain expectations, right, of maintenance and lifecycle. And because all those things are much more standardized nowadays, they have a much stronger discipline for security and governance, as well as they can be monitored or managed for performance and scale. As any other piece of software which is productized, the modern API has nowadays also its own software development lifecycle, where you design and test and build and manage and version, right? So armed with this description of the modern API, we can really consider a new approach, which Anypoint calls the API-led connectivity, where in our experience, it provides the answer to producing reusable assets across the enterprise and enabling their consumption really to drive speed and innovation, right? So you don't have to do the same thing multiple times. And we'll go through some examples of that later. Now, when we look at a simple example, like here, API-led connectivity is a methodical way, I would say, to connect data to applications through a series of reusable and purposeful modern APIs that are each developed to play a specific role. They unlock data from systems, they can post data into processes, or deliver an experience, right? And you will see this kind of diagram often when you look at slides, right? There's a system layer, a process layer, and an experience layer. And we'll talk about them in a bit. This API-led connectivity also provides an approach for connecting and exposing assets. With this approach, rather than connecting things point to point, which we all did in the last 20 years, right? Every asset really becomes a managed API, a modern API, which makes it discoverable through self-service without losing control. So let's look at this, this project over here on the screen. At the very bottom, you see this system APIs. In this example, you unlock data from them, for example, Salesforce or e-commerce systems, by putting APIs in front of them. These form this, what we call the system API layer, which provides a consistent, managed, and also secure access to any kind of backend system. On top of that, we have what we call the process APIs. In our example, you can build on top of a system API, or you can combine them and streamline them like customer data from multiple sources into a customer's API, or maybe an order history API. They're mapping customers and orders really to create order status or order history APIs. And these process APIs take core assets and combine them with business logic to create a higher level of value at the end. And even more importantly, these higher level objects are now useful assets that can be further reused So they should also be APIs themselves, right? So in this example, if our web app API wants to get order history data, it is talking to the process layer API, to the order history API, right? While in the past, you likely would have made like 5 different API calls to Salesforce, to the e-commerce system, and maybe also the customer database, right? And now it's combined into one composite API. Now, when we talk about this web app API, this is the level of what we call the experience APIs, right? In our example, an API that is built that brings together the order status and history, which is delivering the data specifically needed by, for example, the web app. And these experience APIs are designed specifically for consumption by a specific end user app or device. Could also be a mobile API. And these APIs allow app developers to really quickly innovate on projects by consuming the underlying assets without having to know how the data got there. In fact, if anything changes to any of the systems of processes underneath, it shouldn't require any changes to the app itself, right? Usually you would have, connected, as I said, to the mobile API. Let's look at the shipment status. You would have queried for example, the toll API and the UPS shipments. Now the mobile API just talks to the process API shipment status. And if the enterprise would add like 3 more vendors for shipment, it doesn't matter to the mobile API because you would just connect them between the system and process layer, and the mobile API would directly benefit out of that. Now, with this API-led connectivity, when you're tasked with a new mobile app, it's now really easy to reuse all those assets. And the best thing, once you build them, anyone in your enterprise can actually use them. Now, when we also look at a kind of typical custom application landscape, here in the left corner in this example, you see what we discussed earlier, right? Customer all information from a database. Through API-led connectivity and a balanced deployment approach, we build out a few API building blocks, right? They are now really highly valuable nodes in a nested application network, which others can discover, self-serve, and reuse for other projects, right? No longer a point-to-point connectivity between, let's say, Salesforce and a SQL database, right? It's just now all in one network. And remember, you were really able to deliver your first project fast because you built your assets, you built your system API, you built your process API, and now you have simultaneously created these reusable assets. In essence, you're kind of having your cake and eating it too, right? And for your next project, and every subsequent project, you're delivering against the existing APIs, right? Your project requirements can get easily fulfilled, and with that, you grow the network. And these nodes get added from each new project, and the value of your application network grows with that, right? As more of your data you're unlocking. What emerges with that is that your application network, in which the nodes are inherently secure by design, they're easy to add and change. With this, you really can get much more speed in subsequent project, and every delivery gets really accelerated. And as you likely noticed, the application network is built from the ground up as a natural yet powerful byproduct of day-to-day project work, done using the API-led connectivity approach with an intention to expose assets that are discoverable, self-served, and consumable by the broader organization. And we'll look at one of those examples later. These nodes are really great pieces like Lego blocks, which can be used to create an enterprise IT self-service delivery model that really drives speed and agility, right? And this is the application network where everything gets connected. Now, before we hop into the demo, I want to give you a brief explanation about what the Anypoint platform makes. You see the exchange. This is actually where all the assets, all the APIs that you create get exposed. So basically like an app exchange, but just for your APIs. There's a management center, which we'll briefly see, where you can manage all the applications, where you can also configure security for different APIs. And last but not least, this is the main part where we'll have our demo, is the design center, where you actually craft your APIs or where you craft your applications. And all of that is powered by the Mule runtime engine. And this is the cloud or on-premise, you choose, engine where you can actually run the whole Anypoint Platform environment. Now, having said that, I would say it's time for demos. So what you see here, this is the Anypoint Platform web-based starting center, right? And we have here on the left corner, the design center. This is where we'll spend some time to craft an API. We will also create a few flows. You see that here's a direct link to the exchange. So basically where you can publish all your internal APIs so that others within your organization can consume them. And on the right-hand side, we have the management center, which gives you all the things like user management, security for APIs, where you manage all the different environments like sandbox environments, production environments, and many other things. Now, I would say we're going into the design center first. We have here a real blank environment, so I just set up a new one for today. And the first thing that I want to do is I'm just creating a new Mule application, right? So you can do two things. You can create your own API specifications in here on the left side, but the first thing that I want to do is a Mule application. Because the very first thing that I want to do is I want to do some extract, transform, load applications, ETL, which is like a real common use case in the enterprise nowadays anyway. So you just call it ETL, for example. I'm going now to create this new Mule App. This will take me then to the flow designer, which is not the flow designer that you know from Salesforce, just by the way. And you always get greeted with this, really nice wizard experience that asks you for two things. First, what is the trigger for the flow? What is actually crafting this flow? Now, this flow is now, because we want to do ETL, should be now triggered by a schedule, right? Now, when I click on this dropdown, you will see a list of different triggers. And these are the built-in by Anypoint provided connectors to third-party systems. So maybe something happens on Amazon S3 and you want to trigger a flow. Or you can scroll down, it could be database, could be email, HTTP, whatever you want. Now, I want to have a scheduler. I just want to do something on a scheduled basis. And the next thing that I want to do is I want to select a target. So when something happens on a schedule, I need a target system. So I'm going to select a target, which could be also some of my own APIs, which could be also, again, something from AWS, many of those different connectors, BMC, Box. But what I actually want to do is I want to connect to Salesforce. And as you can see, we have here built-in by Anypoint provided Salesforce connectors for IT Analytics, Marketing Cloud, and I just use the standard Salesforce connector in our example. Now, when I select that, I will get a selection of different options that I can do with the Salesforce connector. Now, create batch result, create batch objects, but I just want to do a simple create. I just want to create a simple object. There we go. And I'm directly now in the canvas of the flow. I can define the strategy for the scheduler first. Let's say I want to run this every 20,000 milliseconds, so every 20 seconds. That should be good for the webinar. You shouldn't do that likely in real life, but that's fine. Now, I have here my scheduler, which is doing something. I have a Dataweave, and we'll talk about that in a bit. And I have my Salesforce connector now here. When I click on that, you will see like, oh, I need a connection to my Salesforce configuration. So let's actually do that first. Click here for setup. I'm selecting a connection type. You get all those good connection types that you should set up, like OAuth JWT or OAuth version 2. For our use case, I'm just using username and password because that's just easier for the demo. Entering password and my security token, plus I'm connecting to a sandbox environment or a scratch log in our case. So I want to do this as the authorization URL. just quickly run a test so that all the credentials that are actually entered are also correct. That may take a few seconds. And there we go. Perfect. Now, I don't want password. Now, what we can do is we can specify what record type I want to add data into there. Now, as you can see, automatically a drop down came down, right? So the credentials got authorized, and now I get a list of all the object types which are available in my org. Now, for this use case, I just do it really simple. I just want to do a contact, right? So I'm going to select a contact, and based on this configuration, now the scheduled job would create a contact. Now, having said that, we don't have really any data coming in, right? So something kicks off the schedule and something gets created, but there's something missing in the middle. So when you do ETL, you usually have a source system that you would consume data from, like a SQL database or Amazon Redshift, or whatever your systems are that you want to connect and then write data into Salesforce, or the other way around. Now, for this demonstration, I just set up a real simple REST service, right? So let's just open that. You can see this, a real simple app here on Roku, so that we don't have to go through the whole setup experience for a SQL database. And this is just giving me data from a system with, I wouldn't say not so intuitive field names, right? First name, super last name, and great location. But what I want to do is I actually want to transfer this data now on a scheduled basis into my Salesforce environment. Now, as you remember from the initial flow, where you select a trigger and a target, this is where you can connect any kind of connectors which are provided. Now, what I actually do is I'm just going to select a connector again, right? So when you're within a flow with an Anypoint, you can add as many connectors or APIs as you need or want for different systems. Now, in this really simple example, I'm taking a HTTP request. And in this HTTP request, I just say, okay, when the schedule comes in, please just connect to this URL that gives me my sample data, right? And that's it. You can also say, for example, in a reward application, you want to connect for your database, right? And you have a SQL database. Or if you want to get data, for example, on a FTP server, right? So you're just adding another connector in the same way. Now, on a scheduled basis now, every 20 seconds, and get request gets executed. Now, but this is not everything, right? Now the get request is there, but we have those kind of weird names, right? First name, super great, last name, and great location. Now let me actually copy that, because a great feature of Anypoint is Dataweave. This is a functionality where you can map data between an incoming request, which is called the Mule payload, from one card to the other. And Dataweave allows you to actually map between one format to the other. Now, we don't know the format of this yet, so I'm going to set sample data so that we, hang on. Actually, I'm going to create a data type for the payload. I think that's much better. And I'm just defining based on sample JSON how this would look like, right? So based on the sample data, on the right side, you see the schema that gets created for this JSON data. And I call this Roku app data, for example. I'm going to save this. There we go. And now within the mappings, I can easily map the data between first name over here. I can correct my super last name over here. And let's actually take my great location as the mailing city. There we go. As you can see, it's super easy to map data between system A and B, which you usually would do in code, right? I mean, I did so many integrations over the last 20 years in so many different application programming languages, and there was always coding, right? You pass the incoming request, you map that to data on the target system, and here you just have to basically drag and drop that. Now, that looks great, right? What you then do is once you created your flow, you just run the application. And we are here in Design Center. This is basically like, when you look in Salesforce terms, like a developer edition, right? It's just your test bed. You can play with it. You can then inspect data. This is now running, which looks great. And there you see that here on this green line, already the flow happened. This is another great feature within Design Center, where you can actually inspect in real time what's happening with your applications, right? So when I go to this HTTP request, you see there was no input, but the output was actually the data from this REST request. And you see here that it's really coming out multiple times. And the scheduler is running like every 20 seconds. So this list will just populate over time and add more and more context, right? Now here is the next one already added. Within the Dataweave, we can see this is the output that we receive from the request. And this is the output that we then pass down to the Salesforce card, right? Which is pretty easy. No coding needed for this kind of integration. And again, here in the Salesforce connector, you could do the same thing. You see the input that was created. It gives me the data. And here I have a success, which is great. So with different IDs. So let's actually see, because I'm getting here a success message, if it arrived in our Salesforce org. When I go now to my all context list in the org, and I'm going to refresh that, you see that Amanda Catbeers gets created multiple times, right? And every 20 seconds, when I refresh that, I'm just adding data. Now, ETL is just not a single record transaction, right? This is just a simple example to show you how you can set this up. The Salesforce connector itself has also many different options. Like, if you really want to do this in a large scale, you can do batch jobs or bulk jobs, for example, right? So that you can really upload hundreds of thousands of data records. Now, this is a simple way to run an ETL job based on a schedule. Another thing that I really like, and this has also really emerged on the Salesforce platform, is using an event-driven approach, right? So you don't run something on a schedule, you actually run something based on an event. And there are two things that got introduced as well as Anypoint, as well as on the Salesforce platform, which makes this, in my opinion, a super, super interesting approach. Now we get here the all contacts. And what we introduced as Salesforce last year with the winter release is a mechanism that we call change data capture. You likely already know platform events, where you can create your own events and fire them, but change data capture is a new mechanism that you can activate in your org, and it's also, if you want to play with it, available in every developer edition. And change data capture is a mechanism where you define your entity for that change data capture should be activated. And I did that already for contact. And what's happening is that once any record of this object type gets modified, we're automatically firing a so-called change data capture event. Now, to look into this, we're going back into Design Center, and I'm going to create a new flow. Compared to just adding a blank new flow, I will stay in this one. I'm not going to select a trigger. I'm just going straight to Canvas, because I think that's often the easier part. And I, again, want to use the Salesforce connector for that. And because I want to listen to events, I'm selecting the replay channel, right? Those things are all well documented, so so you can read it up. I think this is a good example to actually show how powerful it is to connect all the things. What you can do here is you can listen to all change events, right? Which would apply to all change events if we would have selected multiple objects. Now, we can do this over here, and let's select from replay ID and -1. This is just a best practice so that the system actually picks up all the changes that happens since the last 24 hours. I'm going to close this. As we're already also using Salesforce within this project, we don't have to set up authentication a second time. Now, this data can be now pushed to any other system. I'm just doing it really simple. I'm just doing a logger, which actually just logs the data that is incoming to the console. This is just the most simple thing that you can do. Now I'm going to run this. While this is starting, I think this may take a few seconds. It is always good to know how to find logs for application, because I didn't find it honestly within the first few hours when I worked with this application. And here at the very bottom, just that you know that, you can find your logs where you see in real time all the things that happen with the application that you're actually using. Now, there's already this green line, right? So I didn't change anything in my org, but we shouldn't forget that what's happening is we have a scheduled job, which is creating records, right? And we have now here a job that is listening for changes on contact records. And I want to actually zoom in here. What you see here is the data payload that change data capture. And in this example, on the create event, sends now to the Anypoint platform. I'm getting create information with this record ID and all the fields like my mailing address, first name, last name. So what I can do actually here is I can pick up all changes that happen in my org in real time. So there's no need for ETL transactions. If I want to actually update another system in real time, I can just use the change data capture capability with Anypoint, which I think is really powerful, right? And the best thing is I don't have to write any code. Now, you saw all those different connectors that you can see here. And in the slides and the intro, I talked a lot about the API-led connectivity and that it can reuse all your assets and so forth. Now, let's actually step back from this application and let's go into Design Center and let's take a look at the API specification, right? So what you always do is, or should do is, you should create API specifications for all the custom APIs, for all the applications that you want to use in your enterprise. I'm going to just create an API, let's say API Roku. This is the API that I used in my simple Heroku app. I'm going with the visual designer. There we go, it's loading, perfect. Yeah, I want to get started, great. And what you see now here is a great visual interface where you can define your own APIs. I'm going through the designer, I'm just saying, okay, give me a new resource. And when I look back to my app over here, it's MuleSoft-webinar.com. It will be likely deleted after the webinar, and it listens on the /search URI parameter. Now, I'm going to modify this. Okay, let's say my API listens on /search. And the response, which is coming back in case it's successful, is just a body of type application JSON. Oh, that looks great, right? So should we just leave it this way? No, I'm just going to open this and I'm going to add a few properties. And I'm just doing it really simple because we should have a bit of time. And now we see that my API or a bare API is created, right? I get example data. I'm going to create a few properties, say first name of type string. There we go. I'm creating another property, which is super last name. It's also great, string. And I'm adding another one, which is the great location. And it's also of type string. And now I've defined my API, right? Here we go, perfectly fine. You can also specify that you can add descriptions, more examples, minimum, maximum values, and more things. Now, this is my Roku API that I can use now. And this is a definition that I, as an application owner, would create within Anypoint Platform. Now that others can then reuse this asset that I created, I would have to publish it to an exchange, to a place where anyone in my enterprise can use this. And this is now the Anypoint Exchange. Now, before I do that, let me actually go back and let's also call that Roku API. That's fine. I want to have a base URI. Let's add that, and let's take the real API, real URL over here. There we go. I'm going to add that. So it is part of the specification. And now I'm going to publish this to the exchange. Just with very few simple steps, it is now on my own marketplace. So if someone within my organization now wants to consume this API, they can actually go to the exchange. I'm directly in here. I can see, oh, this has a search parameter. It has a get functionality. Okay, how do I call this? Well, here are code examples directly provided, like if you want to go curl or HTTP, or maybe a JavaScript example. Based on your API, you give all those different options, right? So it's pretty cool for, if you have 500 different APIs or applications, which is often the use case in larger enterprises, you can easily discover all those things. Like this could be a system API that you then composite with a process API above of that. And there we go. Here we go, API Heroku. And if you want to go shopping for other APIs that you can then use also in your flows, here's this whole list of all the different things. And personally, I think this is really powerful because it gives me so much capability of writing flows or kind of connections between so many different systems without actually having to code anything. Now that I crafted my own API for Roku, there's one more thing, because in Design Center, in the scheduled job, in the ETL job, you like to remember that I just added an HTTP request card, right? So without any specification, this HTTP request. Now I'm going now to delete this because I want to reuse an asset that I already built. And you can then go shopping in the published APIs, right? You don't have to know what's behind it. Someone provided, in this case myself, but someone provided this API for Roku. That's amazing, right? It's already coming when I click on edit with a prefix configuration, so you don't have to take care about that, right? And also with your predefined security, if you had that. Now, when I'm going to set this, I'm going to activate that, and with run, there we go, right? This is now a case where I reused an existing asset that someone else created for me within my own flows, which also then means I don't have to take care if someone is going to change the URI, for example, because I can then just reuse the asset that someone else created for me. Now, we can talk about 25,000 things. I'm really excited about Anypoint Platform and its capabilities that I, as a developer, can get. I want to highlight one more thing, and this is the API Manager. Because when you look at all the different things that are available for companies, for enterprise, it's like, how do I manage my APIs? How do I put security in front of them? How do I secure the security between them? What you can do is basically you can just say, okay, I have my API, and I just take one of the APIs which are in the exchange, and then you can define for your own reusage, like for sandbox environments, for production environments, all the different security capabilities that are then automatically managed by the Anypoint platform. Let's say you want to provide special authentication headers. Let's say you want to add OAuth. Let's say you want to provide IP restrictions. You can all build this using the API administration interface, which I think is also really powerful, because I, as someone who wants to consume an API, I don't have to really take care about that, because this is all provided with the standard capabilities that those who manage the Anypoint platform can then, provide me. You get policies, SLA tires, and all the things. Like, it's a lot of things that we can cover, but learning about the API administration capabilities, I think it's a real super powerful capability. Now, before we go to the Q&A part, I want to highlight one thing. We have on Trailhead a couple of really great modules. I know there will also be really soon one about Flow Designer, the tool that you saw mostly in this demonstration. So you should really check that one out. And with that, I would say I want to thank you, and we can open for Q&A.
And Renee, I think we had some audio issues in the beginning. Do you mind just going back up to that first housekeeping slide up there, just so? Perfect, thank you. Yeah, and I just wanted to remind everyone on the call, we'll try to get to all of your questions, but there are so many. If you have more questions or your question was not answered today, please go ahead and visit trailblazer.salesforce.com/answers, and you can ask your questions there. And if you have answers to other questions, feel free to participate in that as well. Also, we have a survey happening at the end of this webinar, so please make sure to stick around for that. Also, this webinar has been recorded, and so that will be posted back on our website and will be on YouTube by tomorrow evening. So make sure to check out that registration page where you signed up for this webinar, and the slides and presentation will be posted. Great. All right, so let's kick off with our first question. Renee, is there a free trial available for Anypoint platform?
Yes, that's a free trial available, and I think you can just Google that up. Anypoint platform. It's a 30-day trial that you can then just sign up for, go through that. It's not longer than 30 days compared to what you know from a standard Salesforce Developer Edition, for example.
Great. Do I have to use the Eclipse-based Anypoint Studio, or can I just use the web-based tools?
That's a good question, and we didn't cover Anypoint Studio in the webinar, but I saw it also showing up on a few other questions. So there are two things that you should know about. First of all, this is Design Center. This is all the things where you can build on a web-based UI, many different kinds of flows. There are also a lot of use cases where the web-based UI is not enough. For that, you can use, and just throwing that up on the screen here, you can use the Eclipse-based Anypoint Studio, which where you can then, using Java, build your own kinds of integrations, right? So this is also the more powerful option, and really depends on your use cases. I found that a lot of the things that I wanted to build were available in Anypoint, but if I wanted to do something else, or if it was more special, where no custom connectors were provided, then the Anypoint Studio is the fallback. And actually, it's really good that I'm here. Let me quickly do one thing. So what you see here on screen, and I accidentally left it open, is I built my own connector, my own custom connector. And what I'm doing right now is I'm just deploying my custom connector to the exchange. So let me actually show you what that means, because I think that's really, really great. I go into the exchange. You see now a third card, right? A connector which wasn't there before. So what I actually did was I crafted a connector in Anypoint Studio. It was doing some, some more advanced things using Java, but this connector can now be used within my web-based flow designer, which I think is really cool, right? Combining different things, and not everyone in the company has to use the same tools, because often it's enough when people use the web-based IDE to perform the tasks.
Great. Renee, how many integrations can I build?
As many as you want. Just depends on on how many runtimes you have, but as many as you want and need. You get it, based on what what kind of account you have, and on how many cores you actually buy, right? Then it just depends on how, what's the capacity that you buy, basically, and this is the only limit.
Got it. Do API calls against Salesforce count towards my API limits?
Yes.
And can I control which fields are sent via change data capture?
No, you can't. So basically, change data capture takes the whole change on a record and sends that on the streaming channel. So no, you can't control which fields are sent.
Can I run Anypoint on premises, or is it just in their cloud?
You can run it basically where you want. So Anypoint has a couple of offerings. So what you see here is obviously their cloud environment, and when you deploy things, it's on cloudhub.io. You can also run Anypoint on premises in your own data center, or if you run, for example, private cloud on AWS, you can also run it there, right? So you pick and choose, or if you want to run some parts in Anypoint Cloud and some parts on premises, on the other parts in AWS private cloud, no problem. You can just mix and match as you need.
Great. And I didn't see anything about security. Can I add additional security layers to APIs?
Yes, I think that's what we covered here in the API manager over here, is where you can then specify for your APIs your own policies, right? Your sliders, alerts, and all different things, right? We can really, when I click through that, throttling, rate limit, IP blacklisting, whitelisting, all the things that you need and want for a specific API can be defined in here.
When creating an API definition, which specification do I need to follow?
So there are two options. Historically, Anypoint has used the RAML specification. So I'm going to create a new specification. You will see that here. I'm just going to the API designer, which is not visual, because then you can switch. I'm going to not visual, give it a great name, because Germans like me always have those creative ideas. And in here, you can then just specify the specification in RAML, or you can also pick and choose and go use OAS, the Open API specification, right? This can only be done when you use I call it manual interface, where you really write down your API specification. The visual designer gives you only the output in Open API, and all the rest is automatically generated in RAML.
What is this marketplace for connectors called again? Is it free?
So it is called Exchange, with like the App Exchange. Let me quickly go to that. Yes, it's free. I think that's pretty much can be done, can be set, and it's a bit different. So you see here on the left side, I have three categories. This is our main one. This is a business unit that I run or own, and these are the ones that are provided by MuleSoft out of the box, right? So you can just go through that, and the list goes on and on and on. I can just scroll down and down and down. You don't have to be logged in to see this public list, right? So when you just look for Anypoint Exchange, and you get it on mulesoft.com/exchange if you just want to dig down, know what they actually offer, and they can experience which assets you already get to all the different systems, and they are all free, right? There are no costs behind that. These are really options how to connect from data A to data B.
Great. Do we have an option to add any custom trigger which might not be on that list?
Yes, I think that's, yeah, the custom trigger option maybe not on the list. I think it's basically like the let me quickly go to this one. It's basically like the custom connector that are just deployed, right? This is just an option. So depending on how you write the interfaces, you can also craft your own connectors. And if you have something that is listening on an arbitrary database system for changes, for example, that can also be a trigger for sure.
What is the purpose of Design Center versus Anypoint Studio? Design Center seems great for demos, but I have not found good real-world use cases. What is the roadmap for this tool?
Yeah, I think that comes basically down to what I said before, is it really depends on the use case where you want to, which tool, right? And Design Center may be not the tool for everyone, because you're, I wouldn't say limited, but the functionality that you have is just based on the different connectors that are available within Design Center, right? If you don't have a connector, then you have to go back to Anypoint Studio and write your own connector, basically, right? Now, when you look back at the demonstration and the slides, for example, you see the different layers. These layers can also be managed by different business units, right? So if you are the part of the organization that handles all databases, you may need some special connectors and some special handling, and then you go to Anypoint Studio and write all the things. But for me, as someone who actually only wants to provide an API for a mobile app, I just don't need a full-blown IDE, because here in the flow, I can easily pick all the different connectors to the process and the system APIs that I need, and then just expose that as a third-party API.
Does MuleSoft replace the need to code API/web service calls via Apex code?
It depends on the use case, I would say. So the question that you should ask yourself is, when looking at the capabilities that integration tools like Anypoint Platform offer to you, is when actually to code or not to code. And I mentioned in the webinar that I was writing any kind of integrations across so many systems, and I wrote like 25 times integration between database type A and database type B. Right? These are all integrations that you have to write. And the same is when you have your Apex calls that do something in a web service. Now, sorry, let's look at this flow, for example. Today, you have a trigger which is doing a call out based on a record change, for example, and it's calling another web service. Now, when you look at this screen, I have change data capture, which automatically tells me when my record changes. And what you easily can do is, you can easily say, okay, I want to then do my HTTP request, right? I'm just adding the same data in here, this is fine, but the same thing that I did before in Apex, like writing an Apex trigger, then doing a call out to some REST service and handle all the things, this is the same what you see here, using just Anypoint Platform, and I don't have to code. And I think that's really powerful.
Can we expose a web service created to be consumed on MuleSoft through Heroku without any coding or customization?
Can we expose a web service created to be consumed on MuleSoft through Roku? I am not sure. Well, at the end, yeah, I think I answered the question.
Oh, it looks like we lost audio from Renee there. While we're trying to get him back online, please feel free to continue to ask questions in the question window. Otherwise, we will look forward to seeing your questions on the Trailblazer community. And again, that URL is trailblazer.salesforce.com/answers. And one other thing to note is that we will be posting the slides as well as the video on the landing page in which you were able to sign up for the webinar. So make sure to check that out. And just for reference, that is on developer.salesforce.com/event. So take a look at all of events, old and new. You'll be able to access some really interesting content there as well. We did also receive a number of questions on how to get access to more information on the MuleSoft Anypoint platform and how to learn more. And so we really encourage you to go to Trailhead. So that's trailhead.salesforce.com. MuleSoft has a fantastic badge that you can go ahead and take, and we would love to have you there. In addition, MuleSoft also will have a presence at our Trailhead Developer Experience Conference, TDX, which is coming up at the end of May. And please make sure to join us at TDX. We'll just wait for Renee for another 30 seconds. And if he doesn't join, we are close to the end of this webinar anyway, but really just want to thank you so much for being attentive listeners on the call today, especially in the beginning when we had some audio issues. And if you do have any more inputs or questions, please make sure to share that with us in the feedback survey. All right, so it looks like we had a computer issue with a freeze in rebooting. But again, we would love to see you at TDX. I'm actually just pinging with Renee now, and he is doing a session on live coding with Zane Turner. So please make sure to attend that. And with that, I will conclude today's webinar. Again, thank you so much for attending. Please make sure to check out our other webinars on our page at developer.salesforce.com/events. And we have a whole bunch of webinar lineup for you to participate in. Thank you so much. Have a very wonderful day.